This again is a synonym and the word is constrain. Right? So for synonym antonym questions, mostly you just either know the answer or you don't know the answer. Sometimes if it's a completely difficult word or it's a new word, you can apply a little bit of root words concept, right? We'll see if we can do that. Constrain. So let me put this in context, okay? If I say time constraints make it impossible to do everything, right? So in this context, I have my options are stress, contradict, restrict and obstruct. Most of you have come back and said 3. Again, we need a synonym for this. Look at this example sentence that I've given. Time constraints make it impossible to do everything. So in this context, what is the meaning do you think constraints means? Some sort of a limitation, right? Because there's not enough time, there is limited time, I'm not able to accomplish everything within that given limited time, right? So which means if you look at the options, stress is not the synonym for that. Contradict is to be in conflict with, right? Somebody is saying something, you're contradicting that. That's not what it is. Restrict, on the other hand, means same thing, right? Restrict means you are limiting someone from doing something. You're not letting them do something, right? That is a constraint. Obstruct means block, hinder. Always go for the most effective word in terms of synonyms or antonyms for that matter. And the best thing to do is always put these words in context in case you are getting confused. So try and quickly associate those words in example sentences that you are familiar with, or try and look for collocations. You know, if you're confused with more than 2 or 3 options, see which word I will usually associate that word with. Like in the first example we saw, right? Lethal weapon, legal system. Look for collocations. Disavowal. See, this is another word where I can apply the context of or the concept of prefix and suffixes meaning, right? So if I remove the obvious prefix in this question, dis, I have avowal. I'm going to remove the obvious suffix as well, al. We have a lot of words with al, right? If you look at the options itself, I have rebuttal, repeal, approval, appeal. All of these words have al as a suffix. So what does a dis means as a prefix? This prefix dis means not. Again, it's a negative prefix. It means not or none. Okay. So if I remove the obvious prefix and the obvious suffix, the remaining word, avow, that root. Avow means to declare openly, yeah, and unashamedly. Basically, you're acknowledging, right? So if you're saying, if this is what it is, so if I add this prefix meaning dis to avow, which means what? Somebody who is not openly declaring or not admitting to something, right? Somebody who's probably denying something, somebody who's probably rejecting something, right? Somebody who's probably contradicting. So if I openly declare, the opposite would be not doing that, right? Contradicting or denying it or rejecting it. So that can be the meaning of disavowal. If this is the meaning of disavowal, I again need an antonym, right? Rebuttal is like contradicting, right? So this is almost like a synonym. 1. Repeal. Repeal means to withdraw, to recall, right? It's an unrelated word here. Approval. Approval means you're agreeing to something. You're doing the same thing, right? I give my approval for so and so. You acknowledge that. So this can be our antonym from the given options. Appeal means what? Appeal has different meanings in different contexts. You're very appealing to me, right? Which means I like what you're saying or what you're doing. It's very appealing. Or it can mean a request, like a earnest plea. So all of this is not. The answer is approval. That's our antonym for disavowal. So I hope you guys are able to break down words and dissect it so it becomes easier even if it's a new and unfamiliar word, right? But like I said, if you are not familiar with the meanings of prefixes and suffixes and root words, you will definitely have to skip this and move on, because I wouldn't want you to waste a lot of time in such words, especially if you have no idea whatsoever. Impeccable. Impeccable. Now sometimes you need to realize that there are always exceptions to certain rules in when it comes to synonyms and antonyms, right? We all know that im as a prefix can bring in the meaning of not, but that may not always be the case. Okay, these are set expressions which are used repeatedly, right? But sometimes there's always exceptions to the rule, so you need to keep that in mind as well. So impeccable, if I say Santosh has impeccable manners, right? So impeccable obviously is an adjective, and when I say Santosh has impeccable manners, and we're talking about manners, so something that is, of a very high standard, right? Something that is out of the options. If I say inoffensive, harmless, important, faultless, what would you say is of a very high standard? Which of these words that I could use and say, you know what, I can use this word to describe something of a high standard? Faultless, right? That's our answer. This is again a synonym that they're asking, right? So anybody else, important does not necessarily mean of a very high standard, right? Look for words, and I gave you an example, right? Santosh has important manners doesn't make more sense, right? What I'm trying to say is his behavior, you can't find fault with Santosh because he's like, the way he behaves and the way he acts and his mannerism is something that people can emulate, right? Can imitate, because he's so good. So that's why I'm giving an example so you can relate the word in a context. Always try and see what meaning the word is bringing in a context. That will also help you. Always vocabulary, it's important for you to learn with context. Otherwise, it's very difficult to remember words, right? How will you remember words? Impeccable speech by Amit. Yeah, good one. Vanquish. Vanquish. I'm hoping this is not a new and unfamiliar word for you. So in all these fairy tales, you'll always have a happy ending, right? In which the hero vanquishes the monsters. Let me put that. So you'll be able to relate to this word in a context. So if I have to put this in context, I'm getting 3, 4 as the options. Let's see. So a happy ending in which the hero vanquishes the monsters means, what can be the meaning of vanquish? Defeats, right? The hero always defeats the bad guys, defeats or conquers. So having said that, if this is the meaning, I need an antonym. Options. Vanish. Vanish means disappear. Vanish. Varnish is like a polish, which you apply on wood or any other surface to make it shiny. Unrelated word. Surrender, on the other hand, can be our antonym, right? If somebody is conquering you, the opposite would be you don't give them a chance. You only surrender. So that's the opposite, right, of vanquish. It has to be. Trample. Trample means like an elephant can trample all over you, to stamp down on, right? That's the meaning of trample. Again, an unrelated word here. Our answer is surrender. That's why I gave you a context. So you'll know what the meaning of vanquish is. And then look at the options and then it'll make sense. Rectify. This again is not a very difficult word, right? To rectify something means what? This is an easy one. Mistakes made now cannot be rectified later, right? Especially in your exam, you'll have to avoid making mistakes because you are not in a position to correct it later, right? If you put in a context, this is an easy one, not a very difficult one. So let's not waste a lot of time. Let's move forward. Pacify means to, you can pacify your friend, you can pacify a spouse. Basically just helping them to, bringing peace or quelling the anger.